One here from Talking Films Online, TFO for short. TFO was founded almost on a whim by Professor Nikhila and myself in June 2020 during the lockdown. It is a group of film scholars, researchers, students, teachers, and anyone passionate about cinema. We are happy that we have been able to sustain this forum thanks to people like you who log in every Saturday to participate in the discussions. It has been our practice to invite people to select and lead the discussion of the chosen film, which we watch in our own time and place. We have also held film festivals such as East European, Iranian, Women's Cinema, and others. We have also held retrospectives of Kelly Reichardt and Adur Gopalakrishnan. In the month of June each year, to celebrate our anniversary, we hold a smartphone short film making contest for students and also organize a lecture series in collaboration with colleges and university departments. This evening, Dr. Javed Khatri will lead the discussion on the film Arrival. Javed did his undergraduate studies in English literature from Gujarat University and PG in linguistics from the MS University of Baroda, Vadodara. He did his doctorate from Gujarat University, Ahmedabad on the topic Language in Media, a Semiotic Analysis of Advertisements of Print Media. His areas of interest are communication theory, media semiotics, and linguistic anthropology. He has teaching experience of more than 12 years, having taught at the Department of Linguistics, the MS University of Baroda, and in a technical college in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Currently, he teaches at Navrachna University, Baroda. Welcome, Javed, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm still audible.
Yeah, you are. Please go ahead.
All right. So good evening, all of you. And I believe I'll keep it informal. So I'll just talk. If you have certain things to ask or you want to make a point, you just raise your hand and we'll continue the discussion. I go with the assumption that all of us have seen the movie, and we are basically talking about my primary concern to talk about this movie is to understand why the director Villeneuve is adapting this particular novella in this specific way. Okay. I think all of you who have seen the movie would agree with me that this is one of the best science fiction in a recent time. So very, very interesting film. And throughout the movie, you won't find any moment where you're not hooked with the screen. And for me, I got to know about this movie some 5-6 years back when I was teaching in Saudi Arabia. That there was a list of movies, documentaries, and novels, short stories, which were directly, indirectly connected with linguistics. And being a linguist, I was interested in that, and I found the movie and started watching it. And what was most interesting for me, even in linguistics, is this idea of what we call Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or we normally call it Whorfian hypothesis. In more technical terms, it is also known as the idea of determinism, which basically says that the structure of your language determines your worldview. The kind of language we use, the kind of language that we are exposed to, will allow us to see the world and to dissect the reality in a particular way. So there is a very specific constraint that the language puts on our understanding of the world. And that hypothesis is not a new thing, actually. It's like Sapir also got it from his teacher. Okay. It was basically somewhere presented by Humboldt. and then Sapir worked on it, and then his student also continued working on it, and that's why, like, Sapir's student Benjamin Lee Worf has been like one of the pivotal linguists who has collected a lot of information and written a lot, and that's why majority of the people still recognize this hypothesis as a Worfian hypothesis. But uh, that hypothesis is not like completely accepted, or that hypothesis has not been completely rejected. So it is still a hypothesis. Like Sapir and Wolf were working in like early 1950s and late 40s. And there are two versions that later sociolinguists and people who were concerned with this idea of phenomenological issues and the language, they talk about the strong and weak versions of the hypothesis. So the strong version of the hypothesis says um, that the structure of our language will what we call cognitively affect our what we call understanding, and they determine how we understand the world. The structure will determine. While another, that is weak version, says, which is largely accepted by most of the people, that at least if it may not affect our cognitive system, but it will somewhere affect our habit formation. Linguistic habits will be affected. I'll give you a very simple example here. Most of I give you example from my own language, Gujarati. In Gujarati, we use words like Suraj Dada or Gai Mata. Okay, it's a very normal and what we call very well formed kind of words. Okay, but we can't do the same with English. We cannot say the son grandfather. Okay, or we cannot say the cow mother. Okay, it doesn't sound good. Okay, and if we look more closely, like we normally think that is because our culture is like that, we have more importance to like given to grandfather and personal relationships and all, and that's why we have these kind of accepted terms. But there is structure of the language that is at work. Okay, that is in Gujarati, dada is obviously categorized as masculine, and Suraj is also a masculine term. Okay. So that's where you can easily connect them. There is a grammatical gender marking happening in Gujarati. While Gai is categorized as feminine, while Mata is feminine. Okay. So those words will go together. While in case of English, there is no grammatical gender marked on these terms. There is a natural gender. We are not talking about that natural gender, but like in Gujarati, we have chokro, chokri, chokru. So you have gender markers o, e, u, which um, allows us to see that one is masculine, another is feminine, and chokru is neutral. Okay. So when we borrow a new word, we tend to recategorize those words as per the system of Gujarati language. And like we have, like in Gujarati, we have borrowed word like baby. Okay. Baby is basically an English word, which is a neutral word. Okay. We can say baby boy or baby girl. Okay. But when it comes into Gujarati, it comes with E. So it is reinterpreted as a feminine word. So now Gujarati people normally, when they say baby, they're basically referring to a female child. So for male child, because we are creative people, we created a new word and we make babo with masculine gender. Fine. So this is where this idea of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis enters. Okay, and that's the concern I had when I was watching this movie. And the hypothesis is very markedly discussed in the movie. Okay. So I have a small document. Um, See, when we look at the cinema, again there is a cinematic language, and normally we connect this cinematic language with the idea of genre. The genre, each genre has its own way of presenting the narrative. Okay, so if it is suspense, okay, your camera work, your music would be of specific type. If it is a science fiction, then you will have a very specific type of cinematography, a very specific type of what we call music, a very specific type of narrative. Okay, and probably the storyline will also be something unique that is very specific to the genre. So in a way, genre is something that determines the cinematic language. Okay. In that, like, when you are making a film as a director, you first think about what kind of movie I want to make. You decide on the genre, and even as an audience, when we decide to watch a film, or we when we think about what we call the favoritism in terms of film. When I ask you what kind of films you like, you normally say genre. You'll give the name of a genre. I like rom-com, I like thrillers, I like psychological thrillers. So that's where this idea of what we call language enters when we are looking at this film as well. So may I share the screen? Will I be able to? Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
been
yeah,
enabled. Yeah.
yeah. Just a moment, then. Yeah. Okay, can you see this frame? All of you? I've taken it on a Word file.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
visible.
it's visible. It's dark. This is from Arrival. Okay, the very early 7-minute sequence where the linguist Louis enters into her university. Okay, and you see this frame, which is very closely resemble to this. This is from Solaris, okay, by Tarkovsky. And Solaris is also one of the uh, very important science fiction film. And
Javed,
Solaris, yeah,
Javed, sorry
yeah,
to
yeah.
interrupt.
Mhm.
There is a suggestion from Tarkeshwar. He says you can, increase the size
Size, okay.
to fit the width of the.
Okay, it's actually a Word file in which on which all these things are there. Yeah. Now, this is from Arrival, and this is from Solaris. So you have almost similar framing. Probably it is done um, consciously to what we call match the idea of cinematic genre, or a kind of gentle reminder that Arrival also coming from the same family of Solaris. Similarly, one more very, very important film, science fiction film, uh, not now, here. This is from Arrival, when first time the physicist and linguist were entering into that um, box of the aliens. Okay, so this is the perspective of Louis. Okay, and this resembles to this 2001: A Space Odyssey. The image quality is not very good, uh, but that's where you're reminded as a what we call audience that uh, the film that you're watching is coming from a very specific genre and as a kind of legacy, kind of association with similar previous films. And this is a kind of statement that the director is making about the language of cinema. Okay. So here the discussion in the entire movie about the language is associated with what is a language, okay, and um, how we can communicate with what we call the species that doesn't understand our language, okay, or we don't understand their language. So the linguist is following a very clear practice of field linguistics when she's visiting the aliens, and she started collecting the data, first in data from the aliens, what we normally teach in field linguistics. But uh, interestingly, the shape of the alien was such that they don't have the what we call articulatory system that the humans have, or their articulatory system does not resemble the humans articulatory system. And that's where they were unable to identify the sounds that the aliens were making, and they shifted to the written language. Okay. So in the book, in the novella, they basically used two separate terms for that, that is heptapod 1 and heptapod 2. The spoken language is identified as heptapod 1, and the written language is identified as heptapod 2. Now, the movie doesn't really talk about the spoken language of the aliens. Movie largely talks about only the written language of the aliens, because cinema and the cinematic language is also a kind of graphy, we say cinematography writing, and that's where the perspective of the director Denis Villeneuve becomes very clear that he's adapting this book, but he's not adapting this book to represent what was there in the book, as what we call loyally as possible in the film. Rather, he's using the book, and he talks about something that is more relevant for the cinematic studies, that is the language of cinema. Okay. There is another, like, first time when we get the news of these aliens, um, where a linguist was about to start her class, and almost all the students get the messages and calls, and one of the students asked her to switch on the news. So that is the first frame. You are not aware what is there on the screen. You can just hear. This is the second frame, where we don't see the linguist but the students in the classroom. Now, these also somewhere resembles the what we call the audience who are there watching the film. Okay. This is kind of Hitchcock used this thing very effectively in the movie The Birds, okay, where he deliberately places the audience in a way that whatever is happening on screen, it is presented as if it's happening because these people have come to watch that film. So somewhere the audience becomes a kind of instigator of all the events that's happening in the movie. And in Birds, there was a dialogue. One character also says that it is because of you that these birds are attacking us. And at the time, the character was actually talking to the audience, not any other character on screen. So that's a kind of putting an audience in the discourse itself. That now we are discussing about language because you are here to know about cinema, to know about the language of cinema. Okay. And even if I have that image, I'm not very sure. Uh, yeah. So here you can see this. It's completely resembles the theater screen. And as the tradition is, the theater is dark, the only light comes from the screen. And these people are basically communicating with that screen. On the other side of the screen, you have something, okay? But you are basically trying to interpret the messages which are put forward on the screen. You're trying to interpret that. And uh, the way the aliens language was, like it is something like you can read from any side. Almost all human, and in fact all human languages are written either left to right or right to left. So they are linear in order, and you'll have to read it from only one end. If you read from another end, you may not be able to interpret it correctly. So the visual language, especially the cinematic language, either you are reading it from left to right or right to left, because you'll have to basically what we call consider everything present on the screen in the frame of that particular screen. So you'll have to consider everything in order to interpret whatever there uh, on the screen, right? So that's where uh, we are indirectly told that you're basically uh, somewhere thinking about the language of the cinema. Now, what is our concern, or what is our understanding of language? What is language for us? We normally think language is a tool to communicate. Linguists and theorists like Saussure also what we call uses metaphor of chess, metaphor of game to understand the language, which was also discussed in the movie. At how do you see the language? Whether language is a weapon, whether language is a tool, whether language is a means of competition. Okay. Like you use language only to debate. So there is a competition, and if it is a competition, then only one will win. Okay. So these issues are discussed very deliberately in the movie. In the book, these issues are not given too much highlight. The majority of the book primarily talks about uh, the idea of the heroine's relationship with her daughter. And there is a lot of things about physics as well in the book, but not in the movie. Movie is more about communication and language. So somewhere the director is interested in uh, identifying or re-emphasizing on the importance of visual communication, the cinematic language, and the role of cinema in the modern society. The way they were asking this question, aliens had a word, like they didn't have the difference between weapon and tool. For them, both were the same. But in our languages, these are two different things. So language can be a weapon for us, language can be a tool for us. But for those aliens, the tool and the weapon are the one thing. So language, for them, they were saying like, we will give you something. But what was that? Whether it's a weapon, whether it's a tool, they don't differentiate it. Fine. So there is this problem of what we call untranslatability from the aliens language to what we call the human language. Like uh, a very important semiotician called Yuri Lotman says that the language is our first modeling system. That is, language models the world in a particular way. The literature, the art is secondary modeling system. Okay. So whenever we are trying to translate anything from any language, and if we don't have equivalence, if we don't have the words which are equivalent, then it's very difficult to reach to the right type of interpretation. Okay. So that's where I was concerned that uh, there are a lot of theories about uh, what we call interpretation of cinema. There are various approaches as well. So I was stuck with the concept of filmolinguistics, originally proposed by Christian Metz, because Metz, following Saussure, tried to create the semiotics of cinema. And there he also proposes this idea of what we call the language of cinema. But when we compare the normal human language with the language of cinema, they are not same. Because in normal human language, we have a morpheme, that is a minimal meaningful unit. Okay. And each morpheme will at least give us one meaning, one specific meaning. But when you consider cinema, what will you consider a morpheme? What is the minimal, what we call meaningful unit? Let's say it is a frame, that is the minimal meaningful unit. And within a frame, we have certain arrangement like choreography, we have camera angles, we have lighting, we have use of color, we have dialogues, we have background music, and all of them can be meaningful. So you have more than one layer of meaning when we want to analyze the sign of cinema. The idea of minimal, what we call distinctive meaningful unit, is very difficult to identify. And that's where Christian Metz tried a lot. He also uh, worked a lot. He talked about different types of syntax, paradigms. He also talked about Lang and Parole in cinematic manner. But that identifying the meaningful unit, minimal meaningful unit, was very difficult. Now, considering this movie, after watching this movie, I like last year I was working with Indian tradition of semiotics, where I studied Bhartrhari and his theory of Sphota. Now, Bhartrhari also comes with a very interesting idea that he doesn't equate any specific linguistic unit with a meaning. That is, instead of equating a unit, like sound itself is not meaningful, word itself is not meaningful, the morpheme itself is not meaningful, the phrase itself is not meaningful. The Bhartrhari talks about the idea of sphota. Okay. That is, uh, there is no clearly defined meaningful unit there. Okay. At times, it could be a word that gives us a meaning. At times, we need to consider a larger chunk of or combination of words, a phrase, or a sentence. Or at times, we need to consider an entire paragraph to understand the meaning clearly and completely. Now, this is something that can help us in what we call identifying a cinematic frame as a kind of equivalence to the food, because in one frame we can have 7 8 layers of linguistic or say meaning analysis, semantic analysis. So when we consider them together, then and only then we will be able to get some meaning from it. And that's where the director's work will become very important, because director is the authority that decides what comes in a single frame. Okay. Everything that, like auteur theory argues that everything present in a frame is because the director wanted it to be there. Okay. Right. And that's where uh, like what kind of framing, what kind of camera angle, which characters, what kind of colors, um, what kind of music, and which dialogues, All these things are basically identified and allowed by the director. So in each frame, we need to understand what director has put in, and we need to interpret all of them in as a one unit, as a food. Okay, look, in what we call a latest uh, school of linguistics called integrational linguistics, that also argues for similar interpretation of the language. And they also argue that the language should be studied in this way instead of uh, taking all these levels of linguistic analysis separately. So in media studies, normally we uh, call it semiotic register, that is multiple uh, semiotic systems merged together to create a meaning. And from painting also, there is a term, yeah, it is called semantic enclave, which was like in a single frame, you can have multiple linguistic systems at work. Like there is a painting, and within a painting, there is a text. Okay. So painting, the color, framing, even strokes of the brush and everything has one meaning. But with that, there is the text, and text will allow us to interpret the painting in a particular way. So again, Roy Harris used the idea of semantic enclave uh, to understand these kind of multimodal text where you have multiple semiotic systems at work. Now, cinema is a system of semiotics that uses almost all the available semiotic systems. Okay. Now, like in case of 3D and 5D, you also have the haptic and like touch, and all those things are also there, and they all are significant. And that's where considering only one science system and analyzing a movie from only one perspective would be a kind of incomplete process. So the question still there. Cinema is there, cinematic language is there, it is with us, in front of us. We can use it, but are we using it as a weapon, or are we using it as a tool? So I think I should stop talking here now, and I would love to hear from you people as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Javed, for that really fascinating introduction to this wonderful film that you have suggested. You have brought in so much of your knowledge of linguistics into the reading of your film, which at least for me personally was really enlightening. Thank you so much for that. We now open it up for discussion. Anyone would like to come in with a question or a comment?
See,
Yeah,
yeah, please.
Yes.
Yes, Rajan.
Thanks, Javad, for actually taking us into all this relationship between cinema and linguistics, which I never have understood. And I have a lot of questions also, because when you talked about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis,
Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, yeah.
it's talking about the Hopi Indians, right? And
yes.
Here we're talking about aliens, right?
Aliens.
In linguistics, we also have the idea of cats and dogs and rats, and that's not quite linguistics, because you have this guy called Konrad Lorenz, who is talking about mobbing of rats and how rats communicate to other rats about poison being put to kill them, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's in a book called Aggression. Yeah. So all those things are very interesting. And I came across an article which is talking about cat sounds, right? Yeah. So that's another bit which we as human beings, or from our Aristotelian system, we think that we are higher than the animals, right? And that's what the movie brought out for me. right?
Hmm.
And also there was a movie called Paddington. Yeah, I think it's a bear abandoned on Paddington Station, and they call it Paddington. And a girl over there says, "Well, he's speaking bear," right? And he's saying all this, but the rest of the people don't understand it, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think all those things come back with this movie, right? And also the question of the limits of the world and the limits of language, which
Language.
Wittgenstein talks about,
Wittgenstein talks about.
is something that happens over here, right?
True.
And of course, well, the politics of it also is something, the weapon, the gift, and the what's it called, the tool, right? Yeah. So
Tool, yeah.
all that is very ambiguous, and the idea of the shifting signifier, which is talked about, is something that's very interesting over here, right?
True. True.
So actually the film created all these problems for me, right? And the idea of the person being shot, the linguist being shot, and all that thing is also a real life thing, which we have a linguist like Chomsky, who's not a political atheist like you, right? Yeah, but he's doing all his linguistic analysis, and the United States has kept getting at him, right, for whatever reason. I think I've talked too much, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think when we talk about language, we're also talking about yeah, the question is time, right? And the linearity of time was something that was brought in over there. And you brought in the idea of left to right and right to left, right?
Mm.
And so when we talk about language, we're talking about time, and we're talking about being defined by time and space.
Time
Right?
and space.
Language, and language. We can't get out of language, and we can't get out of time and space, right? And that's what the Warfield hypothesis does, right? It's talking about the Hopi Indians who have no space and time in the language, right?
True.
So, and here they're talking about circularity of time and all that, which is probably a giant kind of way of looking at the world, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the explanation of Jainism. I don't know how true it is. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just brought up more problems than solutions, right?
So
Yeah,
like
thank
we-
you. Thank you, Rajan. Javed, would you like to respond to that?
See, a movie is like primarily becoming more of an American film. Okay, that is the Americans again saving the world because the Chinese were not ready to communicate, and Russia is supporting them. Okay, and then the American linguist is taking a stand, learning a language, and then calling the Chinese army chief and explaining him that how these aliens are basically helping us. Okay. So there are a lot of political implications as well if we want to read the film from that American, non-American, or typical Hollywood film. Okay, that is this first world, and then that is China, Russia, Pakistan, who are all uh, who are not what we call cooperating with the American stand, or who are not ready to listen to that. So only Americans are ready to listen to. Only one American is ready to listen to them. So there are issues, and basically these issues are not there in the book. Book doesn't talk about any of those political aspects. Book basically discusses a lot about determinism and free will. There is like a lot of monologue that Louis has about, because slowly and gradually she starts understanding the heptapod 2, and by understanding heptapod 2 she's also gaining the insight into her own future, and that's where she's questioning this idea of determinism and free will, which is completely missing from the film. Film actually runs in two opposite ways. Film begins with a kind of the future, what we call flash forward, and gradually they come to this meeting of the husband and wife, Louis and the physicist, I don't remember his name. So in the end, so it was a kind of suspense in the movie that who was or who will be the husband. And in the end, it is revealed that this was the husband, and he will divorce her. But all those things are completely missing from the book. And movie primarily making it more of a Hollywood science fiction that Americans like to see. And not only Americans, we also love to see that. But for different reasons, we all have our own reasons to like that movie. Okay. But interestingly, we all enjoy it. We all interpret it in a different way. So that idea of interpreting the visual message from our perspective, like Rajan talked about the language of the animals, like we study it in zoo semiotics. And Roy Harris has given lectures uh, that got published in from the Shimla. It's called History, Science, and Limits of Language, where he's basically using this hypothetical example. What if the aliens come to India, or sorry, aliens come to the world, then which language we will use to communicate with them? Okay. Because because he's basically questioning Roy Harris's concern is very different from this idea of traditional linguistics, that almost all schools of traditional linguistics uh, concentrates on studying the language. There is a language because of which we communicate. Well, Roy Harris says that that's not really the case. Actually, uh, we want to communicate, and that's why we form or invent certain type of language. So instead of studying language and structure, we should be studying communication and how we develop it to make ourselves comprehensible for others. And in order to argue this, he's using these examples of aliens. Right? Yeah. Anybody else, please? You're talking too much.
Any more? I think Monarch had something to say.
Yes, so
Yeah,
I have a
please.
lot of things to say,
Yeah,
but
please.
Please
I
go on.
always get lost in the form and structure of it and how to put it. So I'll just go by the instinct. Uh, in the very starting, like the beginning, where it held me, the movie held me, was when she asks our character Louis asks that you ask him the Sanskrit word for war, and when the commander comes back and says the translation, and I tried my bit of research on it, but again it is the same thing, that what you understand, and the question that is haunting a lot of literature is whether it be post-structuralism. Even when we talk about unconscious mind, and Lacan and Freud talk about that, how language and even the symbolic language comes in the form which makes us ask the question that do we direct the language, or does the language direct us? And how Rajan sir talked about that we can't escape time, space, and language.
Language.
And something that the movie didn't cover for the a lot of science part, but it caught my attention in the story, was this concept of Fermat's principle of time. And I'm not a science techie person, but what I understood from it is that light can only travel in two extremities, whether
Yes.
it will be
Shortest or longest.
longest.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of plays with the idea of language as well, that as you said, the cinematic language, either it will be left to right or right to left. I mean, the whole movie also talks about how nothing it's always the basic things that we human complicate so much that we can't go back to the basics and understand. It's the thing that we don't need to break the contact. We need to keep the communication between the countries, between the people. It's always the basic thing, teaching them basic vocabulary. But the idea of the movie, that why we see time as central, why we divide them in past, present, and future, and why do not see them in a circular motion. I mean, history is colonized, and almost anything is colonized in a way that we try to form it in one side of truth or a linearity, but it's always central and it will always come back, but in a different way. So I love the direction. I mean, every small bit. I rewatched the movie in fast forward, of course, but even the word name like Hannah, it's the same from both the sides,
Hannah.
and even if you look at from the upper or the lower crust, it will be the same. So
Hmm.
small details like that. It's like the Shakespearean element, that if there is something which has been presented in the movie, it should contribute to the movie. And I
Yes.
think he has done a phenomenal job in directing. There are so many
Yeah.
beautiful moments, and I had linguistics as my minor, so the signifier and signified and so and I wish I got this movie recommended when I was having linguistics as my subject. It would have been so much fun. But I have a lot of things to discuss. We'll keep the panel open for other people, and once they are done, maybe I can come back to them. They are more like discussion rather than questions.
See, one interesting aspect about language is if we don't follow the linearity, then will it be able to be represented? Because if we are speaking, then the time is that order. If you are writing, then the space is that order. So, is
True.
there any other way of representation that we have? Okay, so, this is a human limitation. It's not the limitation of the language, okay, because we don't have any other means of representation. While the haptopods, what they were creating, the kind of circular language, that language was not like, it is not spoken like one sound after another sound.
Mm.
It was a kind of some sort of air coming out from their mouth, or what, like if we call it a mouth, okay, then it comes together, it comes as a sphuta, okay, and there is nothing beginning or end. You can read from left to right, right to left, you can start reading from the middle. And if you look at their anatomy, even their anatomy did not have the what we call front and back, right or left. Okay. They had 7 legs, they could walk in any direction. Okay. And even if you look at their what we call the vehicle, what do you call it, वो यान था ना उनका, so it also did not have kind of front and back. Okay. It was all shaped in a way where you can approach it from any side. So that's where uh, they were not limited by this idea of the surface and the medium. So, and the kind of articulator system that they were talking about, the aliens had, that was not there. Like that's not there in any of our living beings. So it's impossible for us to do that. Probably we all need to be Spider-Man and do something, and some word goes there. Okay. And we may be talking in haptopods, but then no, that's not working. But what is interesting in the movie, as you said, Villain, you did a wonderful job. And this is not the only movie where he is doing something extraordinary. Almost all his films, we get something unique from him. He is one of the best directors working today. So these aliens' names were Abbott and Costello. In the book, their names were different. So why these names were selected? So how many of you have heard Abbott and Costello? They were basically stand-up comedians, and they were creating comedy on the basis of these linguistic ambiguities, lexical and structural ambiguity. So basically, their comedy was based on the issues of communication, human communication. And that's why these two were Abbott and Costello. They're basically highlighting the very idea of communication in all the different small bits. Yeah. Yeah, anybody else, please?
Sir, may I?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
please.
sure, Shubhranshu, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Khatri. It was such a wonderful explanation from your end. Apart from the linguistic and the scientific aspect, I had a philosophical point of view.
Sure.
Can this movie be considered as an optimistic or a pessimistic portrayal of humanity's place in the universe? And how can we see that? Like we can see the recurring image of light, water, and the circular forms in the movie. So does it have any symbolic significance if the film's themes are discussed?
I did get your second question.
My second
Please,
question
please
was,
repeat. Huh.
the recurring imagery of light, water, and the circular forms in the movie are again and again shown to us. So does it have any symbolic significance in the theme of the movie? I was just wondering when I watched it. So
Okay, so I'll first respond to this. Um, Villeneuve is following the genre of science fiction very rigidly. Okay. If you look at Tarkovsky's science fiction, or Tarkovsky has water as one of the motifs in almost all his films. Okay. If you follow like uh, Kubrick's science fiction, like 2000: A Space Odyssey or Clockwork Orange, and he has a very different take on these what we call natural things. Like in 2000: Space Odyssey, they are completely missing. Okay, fine. So basically, I personally see it as a kind of the kind of atmosphere that he creates, which is aesthetically appealing and uh, which also fits into this idea of science fiction. Because the moment we think about science fiction, you go back to like Blade Runner and all, okay, you see that there is certain sort of utopia or dystopia we are talking about. So he's not suggesting any form of utopia or dystopia, but still is creating the atmosphere which is more like dystopian. And the first question that you said, uh, the optimism, like do we see as a kind of optimistic or the perspective on the humans, let's say. So if you're looking as an American, for example, it is a very optimistic film, okay, because the Americans are the people who are saving the humanity and humans at large. But at the same time, we also um, see that the major countries were not cooperating. See, language is a tool, for example, of cooperation. Language is a tool for conflict as well. Language can be a tool for a kind of, let's say, negotiation. But if you stop communicating, okay, the way we have seen in the movie, then basically, in spite of having so many languages at our exposure, we're not ready to communicate. While when you are asking the aliens that what do you want and how can we like why are you here and what you can offer and all those questions were there, they responded that we will need to communicate with the others, that we are 12, so only one particular uh, group of aliens cannot respond it directly. So they require internal communication in order to respond to them. But then humans were actually breaking internal communication in order to respond to these aliens. So it is somewhere pessimistic. Okay. We are like the characters were being humans in the movie. We were typical humans everywhere. So first thing we do if we don't like someone or if we have certain problems with anybody, the first thing we'll do is we'll stop talking to them. We'll stop the communication. Right. And that's what our country is also doing in the movie. So it's a difficult scenario we're living in. Maybe as a citizen, we may not agree with what they are doing, but then they are the authority. And that's the internal conflict of the authority, not of the people. The humanities are or is in the hands of some people who have their own motives, who have their own ego, and they'll not think about the humanity at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shubhranshu, for your questions, and Javed for your response.
Yeah.
Any more comments, questions?
Geeta?
Yes, Nikhila, please come in.
Yeah. So, thank you very much, Dr. Khatri. It was a very, very fascinating kind of reading of the film. I mean, I watched the film and I think I had also watched it earlier, but your introduction opened a perspective which was not available to me when I watched the film.
Okay.
So maybe I should, go back and watch it again, this time paying attention particularly to the way in which language, as you have looked at it, works in the film. I was at one level, my immediate response was, like you said, as it happens in many science fiction films, it's about invasion of aliens and America saving the world. So
Yeah.
at one level, my response was that. But what fascinated me, and I'm also, I really like narratives which kind of jumble up time. So this film, more than the language angle, it was fascinating for me for the way in which what we think of as flash forward, flashback
Text back.
becomes a flash forward.
forward.
So I thought, this jumbling up of cinematic time was very fascinating, and the narrative itself kind of pulling the rug from under our feet and saying,
True.
okay, this is not something that has happened. And it's not like she's battling with, the death of a child that has already happened, but it's something that is to come. So I thought that was very nicely done in the film. I don't know my own sense. You can let me know if I'm wrong here. This idea, it's of course a very philosophical film, a film about how we regard time. If we don't go with the usual past, present, future, if time is a kind of continuum that we inhabit, and so on. I had two questions. One is this something that Louis already knows before the encounter with the aliens? Is this her way of viewing the world? I'm not very clear about that. And secondly, it seems to come across as a special kind of a characteristic that she has. So more than her training as a linguist, as a professor, it seems like a special ability that she seems to have. And that is also reinforced in the conversation with the Chinese person and all that, where there is also like, as if she has a temporary amnesia, she can't remember this conversation that she has had. So I was just wondering, why mystify this character? I didn't quite get this aspect. I mean, of course, your own reading of the film takes it to a completely different level. And as I said, I have to watch it again. But from my, limited engagement with the film, I was just wondering, I mean, is this character seen or created as someone with a special kind of ability to regard time differently from the others? But otherwise, thanks very much. It's a really challenging film to watch. And also you have
Yes.
brought out its nuances extremely well. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ship, that's what I said in the beginning. The very idea of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, in a way, the movie is supporting that idea, that hypothesis. Louis did not have that understanding of time in the beginning, but slowly and gradually, as she was picking up the haptopods language, so along with that language structure, she also develops that understanding of the time, that time is one continuum, and past, present, and future can be seen together. So it comes in Louis uh, with reference to learning the haptopods language. She had that empathy. She never tried throughout the movie. If you check, uh, the physicist was trying to understand for a specific purpose that is probably given by uh, the army. But the linguist throughout the movie was trying to understand the what we call aliens, haptopods. She was constantly trying to communicate with them. She was constantly trying to understand them, and that's how she developed a system of communication that is for the haptopods, which is or which does not have that linear idea of time. So by learning that system of haptopods, she developed that understanding of future. So flash forwards were basically a result of her understanding haptopods language. And in fact, if you remember, there was one sequence where you see she has written a book called Universal Language, and that is the language of the haptopods. That she has written a book on that a later stage. Okay. And basically, those aliens were there on the earth to give that language. The weapon, that the tool that those aliens were supposed to give to the humans was that language, and they gave that particular tool through the medium of Louis. Because if the humans can also start seeing future like they see, then there will be better communication and better cooperation between the aliens and the humans. They say that after 3,000 years, we will require humans. And that's why we are here to give you our language. Right?
I don't know if this has relevance to the film, but I was just reminded of Citizen Kane when it came to, this, the last words of the Chinese general's wife, and Louis trying to recollect that. And Citizen Kane also plays with chronology.
The narrative.
Yeah, in the narrative, and that kind of happens here also in the film. So I don't know whether it has a larger relevance, but I thought of that last word, rosebud, and here
Rosebud.
The wife of the general saying, in
Jason.
wars, there are no victors, but only widows.
Widows.
Which in fact just, turns the whole thing,
Whole thing.
yeah, the other way.
it is very significant from a narrative perspective.
Hmm.
This one line gives us conclusive remarks, or the one word in Citizen Kane, Rosebud. Like in the
Yeah.
last frame, we see what Rosebud was.
Right.
And for an audience, we know now that what they were actually searching for was futile. And for Citizen Kane, the Rosebud was basically his nostalgic childhood. While here, that entire sequence where the Chinese general talks to her was basically a kind of flash forward,
Hmm.
which she uses to tell him to stop this kind of non-cooperation. So
Right.
that is flash forward. That is Haptoport's language is basically helping her to do that. That makes us the watchers, the viewers clear that she can see the future the way Haptoports are seeing.
Seeing it. Right. Any other questions, comments? Faniraj, Tarkeshwar.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Faniraj,
Javed.
please go ahead.
Thanks, Javed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Javed. You have given one perspective, one good perspective to see science fiction. The recent film of Jordan Peele, Nope. Many people try to understand, interpret it in many ways, and we're always saying that there is no unifying this film. No, but but somehow I found a kind of reference here to how to see that film. No, and again going back to Tarkovsky's film, to always for us, Tarkovsky's film is uh, talking to ourselves or going back to ourselves to understand ourselves by going forward. So you
Yes.
have to reach that level to understand that you have to come back to yourself, to the base 5 elements, of, especially water, and come back.
Water,
So
yes.
again, yeah. So Tarkovsky again, like, as you said, again, the soul is traveling inside rather than outside. But that your use of the term that cinema is having a multi-semiotic will help us to understand Tarkovsky's. He calls it as a sculpting in time. Cinema is a sculpting in time. So I
Sculpting
mean, I
time,
was
yes.
wondering, yeah. I was wondering what he means by sculpting in time. I mean, again, that question of non-linearity of time is always there in this film. So your interpretation of this movie
See, it's
gives us a
basic.
better perspective. Understand it, and that no, I think we have seen that cinema. Jordan Peele's 2022 movie No, where again he confronts the language that particular American I mean it, paranoia about UFO and their fascination to Hollywood. He puts them together in a dialectical manner and and it seems to talk about capitalism and much more. So again, but no critique were clear how to understand is no. But your way of seeing Arrival will help us to understand that. And one more film, very recent film of Pastor Virasankulas, Memoria, which most of the people said that they couldn't watch for half an hour, 30 minutes. I mean, 40 minutes, and they walked away. But that in Memoria, there is always a sound, a ultrasonic sound, which again a professor is trying to understand to recollect and regain back memory, which will lead to her understanding of herself. So, it's very happy that I listen to you because it gives us more sense to watch things like Virasankulas Memoria or Jordan Peele's Nope are going back to Tarkovsky. Thank you.
Paniraj, I could not get everything that you spoke. You probably talk about a movie called In Memoria, right?
Memoria, Memoria.
Memoria. Okay.
Yeah.
It is
Apart
by who's the director?
Veerasant Pillai. Apart Veerasant Pillai, Thailand director.
Okay. It's a, I didn't get the word again.
Memoria. Apart Veerasant
Yeah.
Pillai.
I wanted this director's name.
Apart Veerasant Pillai.
Person.
Veerasant Pillai.
Acha. So is it Indian film?
No. He's Thailand. He's
Thailand. Okay. In Thailand, if I'm not wrong, is this Uncle Bunmi who could
Yeah. The same man.
Okay, same director.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, Uncle Bunmi I have seen. I don't know about the Memoria. He also uses his film to talks about the past life of cinema. Is
Yeah.
what we call creating a kind of collage and using certain what we call typical stories from their own culture and how cinema making had changed over the period, because now most of the films are becoming digital films. People don't use the film to make a film. So now we probably need to change a name now of cinema. It is no longer a film, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. So that director, it's very difficult to remember his name, is basically playing with this what we call language of cinema. He's talking about something very serious and very interesting, but at the same time, simultaneously, he's also commenting on the idea of the language of cinema. At least in Uncle Bunmi, I have seen that.
Yeah, same is with Tropical Melody.
Okay.
Memoria is his latest, 20.
Okay, I need to find it. Sure.
And another Thailand director, young director, she's Subichara Pong. He's also working on the same thing. What is the visual language and how to understand?
Okay. See, what is interesting, like when we talk about the language of cinema, as somebody has already mentioned, that there is this fascination of Hollywood, and more and more people are trying to make films like Hollywood films. But then this is a kind of colonization. Like in India, we have people like Adur Gopal Krishnan, who rejected this what we call Western modernity, and who say that I'll try and create the modernity that sustains with my own society. And he uses a very different language of presenting the narrative in the film. So he brings something new. Even someone like what is his name, Kaur. So they are also trying to do something that is non Hollywood. In fact, cinema, the first golden age of cinema was basically Russian. But then they went into a kind of some sort of a different world, and there are political changes, and slowly and gradually studio system took over, and that's where Hollywood becomes powerful. That the studio system changed almost everything in the process of filmmaking. So now we are also trying to do the same. We're also, in a way, in India, is at least in Bollywood, the Hindi film industry, we are also trying to imitate certain forms of Hollywood studio system. But if we are strictly working with the studio system, then probably the directors won't have the freedom of expression. The way they want to communicate may not be allowed by the studio. So Villeneuve or Nolan are important because working within the studio, they still come up with their own signature. They still come up with something unique in cinematic language. And they try, like Nolan usually present the circular idea of time. and he works with the circular narratives. So that's where we need to also think that how free the directors are to make a film. Thanks to OTTs, now the directors have considerable freedom that they don't have to depend on the studios, right? But like there are different streams now. There are what we call hardcore popular films coming from studios, and then there are certain form of parallel film. We don't have the parallel cinema anymore, but still we have the narratives which are not what we call accepted in popular cinema. But because of OTT, because of the internet, because of these various channels, we are exposed to that. And thanks to OTT platforms, now we are exposed to the cinema of the world. We can watch cinema from any part of the world. So if we bring that uniqueness of our own culture, our own style in our cinematic language, probably we'll be creating something better. Right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you would have continued to talk on that political semiotics
Yes.
of Hollywood films. That talking to alliance becomes their a kind of a passion for them. But talking to second word and third word is one direction. I mean, like they think that they are capable of talking to. They are such a higher species that they will talk to next level, that alliance. So they lead that, but they fail to talk to others in the sense that blacks in their own land are creating the museum for aborigines. Their way of talking to South,
Yes.
with all things again, political. If you see arrival with political semiotics, that gives some of the perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Faniraj. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Ajanta, please go ahead.
Yeah, Geeta, thank you, and thank you to Dr. Khatri. Are you able to hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
No, it's such a pleasure to watch a sci-fi film, and I want to go back to the comment with which Monarch I think raised. Because I study psychoanalysis, sir, and psychoanalysis has a very interesting way of looking at the whole genre of science fiction. So, and all of us, of course, know this very well. And Monarch also mentioned Lacan. So for Lacan, the idea of the real is all that is, in a sense, cannot be captured by language. Language is also the defining marker which inaugurates the unconscious. And this is such a rich genre for psychoanalytic interpretation because, in a sense, the language of the unconscious is the radical other. And what's especially interesting, sir, for me also, because this is a woman protagonist, And I wonder if you know about Barbara Creed, the famous, she uses Julia Kristeva's idea of abjection. And one of the first really kind of sci-fi superheroines is Ridley Scott's Alien. And there's Sigourney Weaver, right? She's, of course, part directly of the American Army. Here, what I thought was very interesting is that instead of the American Army, it's been replaced by American English or American language.
Right.
So there's a whole, so the politics, of course, is very, very, in some ways, problematic. But the idea of that language is always bound to fail. So, and however, the architecture of America and the world, etc. The other thing is, this idea of a woman using the language as a two-stroke weapon. And I think we can kind of write a thesis about that. Of course, I also love the Dune, and every sci-fi film can be read at so many levels. But I was also wondering, sir, so my second comment is this. So there is not just Hollywood, of course, is not monolithic. And I was thinking of Peter Wallen's film. It's called Friendship's Death. So Friendship's Death, sir. And this is Peter Wallen, who's the semiotic theoretician. So friendship is again similarly a kind of, he's not a cyborg, but he becomes detached from the mothership. So in a sense, he's no longer bound by the Oedipus complex. And this time, this guy ends up, fighting on the right side. He joins. He lands up in the Middle East, and of course, because this is Peter Wallen, he fights on the right side. But so what I'm suggesting is that so the science fiction genre itself is so rich, and especially from a feminist perspective, going back to Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. So it's also about childbirth. It's
True.
also about marriage. It's also within, the American nuclear family at the end is not going to stay the same because it's a woman who knows too much. So I think,
Yes.
we are never in control of language. And of course, we take positions within that language. I was just suggesting that because this is a woman, it's language and it's sci-fi, there are many, many different levels that we could give to it. And I'm so glad that you introduced the linguistic angle. I actually have not watched this film very sort of closely, but I just wanted to log in today because I love the Dune, and I do think, as you said, he's one of the really the masters of the genre. But as we discussed, I was just suggesting, because she's a woman and she uses the language, I think it has whole different kind of philosophical implication, and at the end, because the family is going to break, so there's that too. It's very much an American film
Yeah.
in so many ways.
She is a woman, and there is very interesting book called, and it's an empirical study. It's entitled "You Just Don't Understand." The book argues that the man and women have a very different approach to communication. That is, women normally communicate to cooperate. They communicate because they want to understand, while men normally communicate to assert, to say that I'm better than you, kind of thing. Okay. So this book I have in my cupboard. I don't remember the name of the linguist who wrote it, but she is also a woman, and she has done the empirical study on that, and this book is a result of it. And it proves there that there is a very distinct what we call style of communication across gender. So when a heroine, a woman linguist, is talking to aliens, she is the only one who is interested in communicating. Rest of the people, because they were all males, were interested in getting information, or what we call making it more in terms of, let's say, how we can use it, or they see a threat and they think that they need to be ready to fight against them. And that's also an issue that Chinese and Russian groups didn't have the women in their, like, we could not see any woman in their groups. So that's possibly a reason that they only see these aliens as something threatening, as a kind of competition, and they thought that we must fight against them, while this woman only wants to communicate and cooperate and know more about them. So it's very important that the choice of having a woman in this role is a very, very what we call significant choice. It means a lot. Like, as you mentioned, it's about nuclear family, raising a child, and single mother, and all these issues. They are also very significant in that sense. Right?
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? Yes, Tarkeshwar, please go ahead.
Thank you for the discussion. I had watched this film earlier. Even I thought I should use this film for my students when I teach theories of language. So thank you for bringing the discussion here, and it was a good discussion so far. But I wanted to say that the word communication is highly problematic here. I think it is when I saw the film, I thought it was a translation activity and then a decipherment. deciphering it. And it's an hermeneutic exercise that is happening. And interestingly, it is not what is there they're trying to communicate. It is how we interpret it. The woman, the translator, the interpreter comes out with particular meaning. The others have their own meaning. The Chinese have their own meaning. So in that sense, we bring in our past experience, quote unquote prejudice into interpretation. There's nothing
Definitely.
like one interpretation is proper and the other interpretation is not proper.
Yeah.
The question is about arriving at a consensus or negotiation, or the word that she uses is zero profit thing. I think it is not about communication, it is about being on the same page. So she wanted to ensure that the others will be on the same page as her, and also even the Chinese premier will be on the same page as of them. So even now, I don't know what they were trying to communicate, the quote unquote the aliens. We only know what she deciphered it. So in that sense, the question of time is also quite future, and time is also quite interesting.
Right.
If we can understand that language, we can break the chain of time. That means now we are translating it as we can understand the future. But I don't know whether she can understand the entire future or she can understand only her future. The way the narrative unfolds, it only gives us an hint about, basically about our future, not about the any other quote unquote future. So the future is also something that is enabled by the language for us. If you don't have a future tense, then you will not have a future too. Or you need to shape language in such a way that our future will be in a particular way. It is not that we learn this language and we see the future. You shape the language in such a way that then we achieve the future. Language is also something, is not simply a means of communication, but also to do things, to make things, to create things that doesn't exist. Future is also something that doesn't exist for us. So through language, we create the future. All of us live because we have an idea about future, what I want to be, how I want to be, or how I want others to be, how I want my prime minister to be. So this idea of the future is something that drives us. So in that sense, we work towards creating a future that we imagine through the language. So it is not that the future is already there in that sense. So somewhere I think there is a tension in the way a theory of language is proposed and the way it gets resolved in the narrative. I think that is also very important in this narrative. So the future, we don't know what it is, but regarding the future, all of us have to be on the same page of interpretation. So that's what I thought the narrative is trying to tell us. Whether that interpretation is right or wrong, we have to wait and watch. And then again, this fractured time and then the jumbled up sequences that we have. In the narrative, it is jumbled up, but when we see, we accord a linearity to it. So because we are according a linearity to it, we are saying the director has jumbled it up and deliberately. So it is our experience, again, which comes to the fore to linear, to put the sequence in a linear way.
Yes, yes, that's an important aspect, like translation, first thing you mentioned. So certain, in case majority of this communication theory, they simply say that communication is basically a process of translation, translating your thoughts into a specific code, specific linguistic code, that is comprehensible for our receivers. So translation is something that is unavoidable as long as we need to communicate. Because we first of all need to think about who is my receptor, who will be receiving my message. And considering that, I'll construct a message that is comprehensible for my receiver. So that's one thing. Second point you've raised, and which is again very appropriate, to be on the same page. That is to cooperate. If we don't understand each other, we will not cooperate, because we all have certain what we call selfish motive, and that may not allow us to cooperate with each other. So that's where the comprehensibility, understanding of each other, understanding of each other's perspective, also important. And yes, you talk about the future, that after learning a language, or probably the alien's language, how has a kind of capacity to construct the understanding of future. But again, that future is also a kind of subjective future, that you will, after learning the language, you will not be able to know everything about the world. You will be able to understand only about yourself. So as you're saying, that is a kind of uh, idea that we want to construct a particular kind of future, and that's why we need to communicate in a particular way so that that future becomes possible, right?
The point that I was trying to say is that so the way you define translation, it's a normative way of defining translation. But I would rather move in the direction of descriptive way of describing translation. So for me, the translation is not an activity of finding right equivalents, because as you said, there are no right equivalents in languages. So it's a process of creating equivalents where none exist. So the languages are disparate. There are no equivalents. We make them equivalents. And there are consequences of making them equivalents. That is quite interesting for me.
No, the question is why we need an equivalent. Okay, that's very important for us, because we want to make ourselves comprehensible. We want others to understand us, right? We want
No,
others to
yeah.
understand our idea.
So that is one point of it. See, somebody who has written something and dead and gone, I don't know what was their idea. What is left to me is what they've written. Now I translate it. I translate it and assign equivalence to it in my language, in my time and space. So I am not bothered about the intentionality of the code and the encoder.
The encoder.
Because sometimes we don't know who is the encoder. I just have a piece of paper in front of me which I have to make sense of it today in my language, in my time and space. So in that sense, looking at the intentionality, that's where the communication theory falters, I would say. So communication assumes that there is somebody who is encoding and there is somebody who is decoding, and there should be a right way of decoding it. Otherwise, there will be miscommunication and misunderstanding. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not the question of communication and misunderstanding. It is the question of
interpretations.
And while interpreting it, our preconceived knowledge and experience comes to the fore, and also our desire for the future. What kind of future that we want, that also plays a major role in the way we interpret it.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's true, that interpretation, and there are multiple possibilities in terms of interpretation. Okay, but whatever interpretation we are coming up with, we need to have support for that interpretation within the text. Okay, so that that interpretation can be a kind of valid kind of interpretation. When, let's say, we connect our experiences with certain interpretation in the text, those experiences should be harmonious with the other aspects of text as well, so that that interpretation will be a kind of constant kind of interpretation. Otherwise, for every sentence, you will be probably connecting a different experience and giving a kind of different interpretation, then we are not making a text, even in reading, like what Barthes call readerly text and writerly text. Right. Yeah.
But Javed, I have a problem here because the idea of equivalence, right? When we were talking about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and we were told that there is no space and time, and that's what they got shocked about, that the Hopi Indians didn't have space and time in their language. And one of our classmates or the person who was in the discussion said, but they must be having something which is equivalent to that. And then we had a problem over there because I think that's what the movie is doing. It's saying that this is something that is beyond our kind of limited understanding of the world, right?
True.
And when we're talking about future time, we're not talking about future tense, because in English we don't have a future tense.
Future tense.
And yeah, so the idea of tense and time and all those kind of things are also complicated here in this movie. Yeah.
True. So it's basically like dissecting the reality in a particular way. But then how do we represent that reality? How do we talk about it? Right. So yes, equivalence is a big issue for us, even within very close languages like Gujarati and Marathi or Gujarati and Hindi. We have this issue of equivalence. But then the issue the movie is raising is like, how do we cooperate? How do we come on the same page, as Tarkeshwar has said, put it in a good way?
But is a movie talking about something beyond language, right? Which is something very important. And there's a linguist called Tom MacArthur who is talking about physical expressions, and it's about the teaching of English. I think that's an old book.
Mm-hmm. So like, there's a term for that in English language teaching. I forgot it, but like there is body language and all these things are also involved when we are communicating, when we are talking to others, and all those things are also somewhere meaningful for the people who are interacting with us, right? So it's not just language. Our tone, paralinguistic features, all those things are also, and our prejudice about and against some people, they will also contribute to our uses and interpretation of the language. So
Yeah.
it is a kind of integrational approach. See, what is interesting about this movie is, in a way, he's making a kind of meta film, a film about the language of cinema. And that is something that the most important for me.
In a way, it's also, sorry, Geeta, can I?
No, please go ahead, Nikhila.
Yeah, in a way, it is also, I mean, just thinking aloud with you, in a way, it's also against, linguistic determinism, I would think, the film, in the sense that if, as in the film we see, if she, even though she can visualize the future, if she still, goes along with, with whatever is happening with her. So what does it mean? Does it mean that language determines the future? Does it mean that there is a desire, a particular kind of desire for, I don't know, normal, a nuclear family, normal within quotes, that is impinging upon her need or desire to, this whole, moral weight that she has to set things right, to really understand the aliens. I mean, I don't know whether it comes from a particular kind of desire to have a certain kind of a future which is normal within quotes. I don't know, how one sees this. Yeah.
See, there is in the book, these things are discussed with length. For example, there is, I think, 4 or 5 pages where this heroine is contemplating on this idea of determinism and free will. And she comes to the conclusion herself that uh, though we can see the future through this language, but we cannot change it. There is no free will. The future is already fixed. So that's what is shown, but there was no justification given. Basically, when these aliens have come on Earth, they already knew the future, and by knowing the future, they knew that who will cooperate with them, who will understand their language, and what kind of conclusions they'll get in the end. It was already there if they were knowing the future, right? Still, there are 12 different groups of aliens come to the world. So if they knew that their purpose will be solved only in America, okay, then why do they send 11 other group of aliens? So there is this question of free will that the film is not talking about. Film is not even touching that aspect. While in the book they say that there are more than 120 such groups of aliens in the different parts of world, and there are 12 within America itself. But all these that we are seeing we are reading in the book and we are seeing in the film, they are basically perspectivized from only one person's point of view, that is the heroine. So in the book she said that there is no free will. She'll have to go along with whatever future comes, though she can see that. So a lot of what we call loose ends for which we don't have answers in the film.
Okay, any more questions, comments?
I just wanted to add upon what Nicola ma'am talked about the future. So the question that if you visualize the future and if you can actually see it, or even the decisions you take sometimes visualizing the future, keeping it in mind. So is their spaceship, or if we choose to call that, or their adapt habitat of the aliens. In one of the interview, there were a group of linguists who were kind of consulted for the movie. So one of the linguists said that spaceship reminded her or resembled the Tower of Babel for her, the story. And as even Mr. Khatri talked about that, that the idea of free will, and the idea that there is no free will, and even if we entertain that the future is always fixed, and even if we think that we have a choice, but then there is the whole idea of free will and the Christian idea of men not being men if not given the right to choose. So a lot of paradoxical complexities, which again puts us forward to the idea of language, and that even the words we speak are words for another words, and words are not for things, not resembling things. Even how the movie starts, that war is a desire for cows, or is war something that we fight or we disagree, or is weapon a tool, or a tool is a weapon. And even how the there is a point in the movie where the physicist and the character of Louis sits in the plane for the first time, and he's reading the preface to her I think research paper or something, and there were very emotional kind of basic stuff written in the preface, where she uses that language is the single common weapon, or something like that, where she herself describes language as a weapon. So it's if it makes us want to talk so much and discuss so much after watching the movie and still not get over it, that shows how brilliant it is. And yes, even the last scene where she talks in Chinese, Mandarin with that person, the politician, and the thing which we're saying as the referring to Tower of Babel, that we do not have a single universal language, and the whole purpose of aliens giving that language, and in the end, if I'm not interpreting it wrong, there's a universal language at least where everyone can talk, and we have that flags in the UN assembly, and it was very it kind of gave me a dystopic feel. I don't know why. So if you just can touch upon that do we do does that scene mean that they have a universal language at the end?
Yes. So the preface thing you mentioned, the statement was language is the foundation of civilization. It's a glue that holds people together. It's first weapon drawn in a conflict. These are the three statements that they use. So she's writing that language is one of the weapons in the conflict, first weapon, because we start what we call portraying the other party in a negative way through the language. And that's how we can justify our aggressions towards the other party. So we need to kind of uh, create a villain through our language, so that people don't question that why are you fighting against someone or attacking someone. Like, we have this uh, normal discourse of restoring democracy and fighting terrorism and all those things. So that also comes from the language. And the last scene that you're talking about, the idea of universal language. So there is this what we call a fallacy that majority of these European countries live with, is that if you have multiple languages, then you will have a lot of conflict. Okay, because through the Tower of Babel and the very idea of having multiplicity of language, the discourse that is generated is uh, if there is only one language, there will be lesser conflict. Okay. And that's why most of these countries try to impose one language, one nation, one language kind of discourse is always there in political scenario. So that is basically a fallacy. It's not something truthful. Even if you are using the same language, you may kill other person on some other grounds. So language is not that thing that will unite us. But yes, in the movie, they like she published a book called Universal Language, and that Universal Language book is now available to everybody. So there is one common code that will enable all the leaders or all the countries to communicate with each other. So there will be lesser conflict. Okay. And that's their what we call a kind of utopian conclusion to this entire conflict. See, there are linguists, there are people who have tried to create a kind of artificial universal language, and they haven't been successful so far. Esperanto is one of those examples.
Any other questions? Yes, Mona, go ahead.
No, I was saying that thanks a lot. It's just Lovely.
Okay, okay. Any other comments? Okay, we will conclude this session. Thank you very much, Dr. Javed Khatri, for introducing this film. And I think the fact that the discussion has gone on till 22:51 shows that it has been an extremely interesting discussion and a film that has generated this kind of discussion. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming and participating in the discussion. Good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you,
Good
Dr.
night. Yeah. Good
Thank you
night
for
and have a
the
nice Sunday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all. See you soon.
Sure.
See you next week, next Saturday. Good night.
Good
night.
night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good
Thank
night,
you all.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.